the same.
Yeah.
Just constantly
Where are you
busy.
from?
I'm in Oklahoma.
Oh, I'm in Michigan. It's pretty rainy and cloudy up here. The fog colors are pretty up here now.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Being recorded.
Yeah.
And they really needed that.
We're all set back here, Colleen, when you're ready. But we do not have Deanna Byrd yet.
Yeah.
She's still trying to get in. So
You know, wasn't really- No, no, no. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah.
Okay, bonjour, everybody. I think we're ready to begin. Super appreciate your patience in the last few minutes. Somebody didn't show up to their panel. This guy. And the Zoom crashed a little bit in the back. We had to restart the computer, technical difficulties. So we do appreciate you working through that with us. We are putting on a hybrid conference And so, the technical difficulties just kind of arise. But I am so excited and honored to introduce this next panel because it's just full of people that I admire, people that I've worked with very closely, and people that I'm just starting to work with and get to know. There's a wealth of knowledge on this panel, and I'm so excited to hear silly things people and their institutions say about repatriation. In this panel, we're joined by Deanna Byrd, who is the NAGPRA liaison and for the Historic Preservation Department at the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. We're also joined today by Amber Hood, who is the Director of Historic Preservation and Repatriation at the Chickasaw Nation. Mr. Terry Kemper, who is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Mille Band of Ojibwe. We're also joined today by Shannon Martin, who's Gun Lake Pottawatomi and Ojibwe Lynx Clan and Executive Director and founder of Cultural Pathways Group. And we're joined today by her mother, and Sydney Martin, who is also Gun Lake Pottawatomi and a very well-respected elder of her community. And Melissa Wiatrolik, who's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. You'll notice we have 3 panelists in person, and we have 3 panelists joining us from Zoom. This panel is going to highlight how NAGPRA practice has changed in the last 30 years and can you believe all of the education and advocacy that Native nations have taken on to deflect many of the long-held beliefs that Native peoples are property, or that all of our oral traditions are just myths, made-up stories, and even that there are no Native people left. Practitioners will share their stories on this panel. So you might hear some of those silly little things that some of these tribal practitioners have heard over the years. So these stories will be interesting and maybe even funny, maybe serious, we don't know. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. Do we have Deanna Byrd with us yet? We do not. Okay, so
Here, she's here.
okay. Great. Let's take a moment to welcome our virtual speakers, Melissa, Amber, and Deanna. We're getting them pulled up here. All right. Well, our first speaker today is going to be Deanna Byrd. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists so we can hear about these silly little stories. Now, miigwech.
Halito, everyone. It's Deanna Byrd. I serve as our NAGPRA liaison for the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I'm very honored to be here with you all and to share this space with the panelists, even though virtually. I do have a caveat. So being virtually, as you know, sometimes it gets glitchy. So if I disappear, it's not because I left early, it's because of technical difficulties. I just wanted to throw that out there. But when Colleen asked about sharing stories, I thought it was really important because, these are really heavy topics that we have to broach. And sometimes, it's hard to keep a straight face when we get asked these things. But in the consultations that I've had, I think that, they surround misconceptions and cultural affiliation. Those are the 2 that I encounter the most. Just recently, I went up to the Oklahoma Museum Association and had this little man walk up to me after our presentation on demystifying NAGPRA. And he came up and he just said to me, he said, "I have a rifle." And I was like, okay. And, and learning a little bit more about it, he said that it was a Creek rifle, that the founding collection for their museum was of a Creek individual. And he asked if he had to give it back. And of course, I recommended that he talk to the NAGPRA staff at the Muskogee Creek Nation and gave them their contact information. And then he turns to me and he's still kind of scared. And he says, "Well, does that mean all Native American artifacts have to go back from my museum?" And I said, "No." I said, "Not necessarily." I said, I explained to him what NAGPRA was and the terms, and he felt a little relief. And so I think that he's willing to proceed with that conversation. But, that taught me and reminded me too, that there's a lot of fear and misconception out there. Another misconception I get is about emails. I've ran into so many people that are scared to death to email a tribe. They're like, you guys are so busy. I know you guys, have so much to do. I don't want to burden you. And I always reassure them, we'll make the time. It's a sacred responsibility, and we feel very deeply moved to do this work. And so please send us the email. And so those are kind of two misconceptions that I get on a regular basis. The other ones really have to do with cultural affiliation. And while comical, they're really serious implications. And so the first one happened a few months ago. Someone tried to, I won't name names here, but someone tried to publish a NIC. And so in their notice, they had affiliated all of the ancestors in their institution with one tribe. And it came across my desk and I was like, wait a second, we have, that's a space in our homeland. We were never consulted. So I called her up and spoke with her, and she said, oh no, I've done my research. I read a couple books and it looks like that this is the route I need to go. And so I asked her to meet with the Star Alliance, and I asked her to reconsider, and we're on a well-rounded path after a few conversations. But that's just one of the funny things that I think is important to note here in this conversation is that it's not about reading or research, it's about consultation, and sometimes that's not understood. The other one was another kind of funny, silly thing people say is that I was working with an institution in Arkansas, and in discussing, the scope of her collection and what consultation had been done. She's like, oh yeah, we've done consultation. I was like, okay, well, I must have missed that consultation invite. I said, would you mind resending it? And she's like, oh yeah, well, we hold them pretty regularly. And I said, well, again, if you wouldn't mind sending me the information because I missed it. And she goes, oh, no, it's internal. And I said, oh, internal. I said, what's that? And she said, well, we just invite anyone with Native American ancestry at our museum to come and join and consult. And then they advise us how to proceed. And I said, well, that's not really how NAGPRA works. And so we had a very frank conversation, and she was happy to change course. But I thought that was pretty interesting that she had already had a consultation committee. The final one I'll share before passing it on to the other participants is pretty serious. And, I won't again name names, but it's a very large repatriation. It's been in the works for many years. And I remember distinctly being in the room with several archaeologists. I thought it was just kind of a one-on-one, maybe 1 to 2 meeting. And there were several other archaeologists in the room. And they were trying to ask me very directed, pinpointing questions about Choctaw culture and history. And one of the things that they were very concerned about was that, they couldn't understand or quite grasp the cultural affiliation. There was such a complicated history in the Southeast. And so they were really concerned about returning ancestors that were warring with another tribe. They didn't want to make a mistake on behalf of those ancestors. And I just looked them dead in the eye and I said, we're not warring now. And so that was, one of those things that, in hindsight, it seems pretty silly, but it was very serious that this had caused such a delay in moving forward with repatriation. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to the other participants. And again, if I lose you guys, I apologize, but thank you for inviting me to be a part of this important conversation.
Thank you, Deanna. Well, Chakma Sahochifo at Amber Hood. I serve as the Director of Historic Preservation and Repatriation for the Chickasaw Nation. Today, we're going to share some real-life situations we have encountered regarding repatriation misconceptions and how we were able to turn those misconceptions into learning opportunities. The misconception that I encounter most often is that perfection should be achieved prior to consultation. The most striking example of this happened early on in my work with NAGPRA. A case had been stalled for quite some time, and we kept asking for updates, but there was seemingly no progress. Therefore, consultation was not happening. After an extended amount of time passed, we asked to meet with the museum leadership. During that meeting, I learned that a ceramic shard was missing, and they hadn't been able to locate it. They had been looking for quite some time to no avail, and this was why they were not ready to consult regarding repatriation of the ancestor. Things were not perfect yet, and they were working behind the scenes to remedy that situation. Their preconceived idea about what NAGPRA consultation should be had in actuality stalled consultation altogether. Once we were able to sit down together and discuss the situation, I was able to explain our perspective to them in a way that they could connect with. That connection is important because sometimes there's a disconnect in the museum community. We frequently hear the words collection, cultural material, or ancestor, but those words do not accurately convey our truth. These are our family members, our grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, and cousins from long ago. So I asked them to sit back and imagine that their grandmother had passed away. Then the funeral home director told them that her pearl necklace had been misplaced, so they would need to leave their grandmother at the funeral home indefinitely until it was located. Sitting at that boardroom table, I saw the look of shock on their faces, but more importantly, I saw the light come on in their minds. You see, they had been asking the same of us when they said we should not repatriate our ancestor without the funerary object, because maybe someday it would be found. In that moment, I believe they understood. They would want to bury their loved one, and we were simply asking to do the same. The museum director apologized and immediately committed to completing the necessary steps for that repatriation to move forward. That is why consultation is so important. During consultation, we're able to openly discuss issues and work together on a path forward. I hope this story has helped you to understand a little bit of the experiences that we deal with. There have been numerous cases that I could tell you abhorrent things that we've heard, but I felt like this was the most striking as an education opportunity that hopefully reaches you as well. Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Bushkinyashin Nijinakas, Nimamaki in Dunjuba, Wasasin in Dodem, Mississagi Ginin in Dunjuba, guy. So first off, I'd like to say that, you know, some of the things that we hear doing this work can really make you angry. And that's not our value system. And we have to really be careful. We're trying to form relationships. And so some of the things that we hear that are kind of funny, because you wouldn't hear that normally on anywhere else, but the ignorance out there today towards Native American people is, when you deal in this, is pretty high, and you hear it every day. You don't talk to companies and hear that they're willing to work with you. Instead, you hear them trying to get away with things. But my first repatriation was 7 individuals. And the house was actually built on a burial cemetery, burial ground. And the individuals, their wall fell in, and the individuals were right next to the wall. And so we took them out of and then we were going to rebury them right in the same area. Because that's what we do in Minnesota. We try to bury them as close to where they were buried originally. In the meantime, the homeowner says, oh God, now I'm going to lose my house. So he was under the impression, because there was Native Americans there, that they would take his house away because they found human remains there. So we had to assure him that we would work with him, and that wasn't going to happen. Then the next thing that happened was that he was really intrigued that he, you know, was on a burial cemetery, and that these bones were found, and they were Indian bones. And he posted it on the web, on Facebook. And pretty soon there was people inquiring about it. And he met a lady that was from California, was inquiring about the Indian burials that was found on his property. And his wife found out that he was having this lengthy conversation with a lady from California. And she divorced him. She left him. Well, you know how that goes. Then the lady from California moved in. yeah, so he moved a lady from California with a daughter and her mother into their home. And by the time I got there, we were already talking about reinterment and reburial back on the property itself. And so I went there to do a ceremony, and I sat and talked with the individuals in the house, and something just didn't seem right. Something was off. I couldn't figure it out. So I said, do you mind if I smoke my pipe? And, they said, sure, come on in. So we smoked the pipe, and I smoked it and trying to figure out. And anyhow, long story short, the lady was what they considered to be a Wiccan. And her family and her mother and stuff were all Wiccans. And they were doing Ouija board. And they were calling up the spirits of those that were in that area there. And so, this is the first project that I was on. So this is totally blowing my mind. So I'm like trying to explain to them, this is not a good thing you're doing here. Don't be doing that, And so they didn't listen. And the young girl that they have under the Wiccan, whatever it is they do, has to have a relationship with a tree. And she was out having this relationship with this tree in their backyard, which was a great big pine tree. Great, huge. And the following evening, there was a storm that came through and wiped out that tree, and it fell on their house. And I was like, see, I told you shouldn't be doing that stuff, But how crazy is that, that's the first project I was on, and all that occurred. We didn't hear the relatives, and I visit the site quite regularly when I get by there to make sure that they're okay and that things are good. Some of the other things I've heard in the field with archaeologists, and this is no dig on you archaeologists that are out there that I just met, but I was in the field with them, and we were on a mound site, and there was probably about 4 archaeologists, and I watched them. Some of them, I'm in Minnesota, and they outsource archaeologists, I don't know why, outside Minnesota, and they come into Minnesota from other states for companies. And I'm standing on a mound group site that no longer is there because a freeway went through there, and the road, there's a double lane freeway highway, 2 lanes on each side. And the mound site is literally underneath that highway. And there's one intact mound that's off to the side. And I'm watching these archaeologists, and there's 4 of them there, and they're all looking down in this hole. And the first thing I thought of was, what is that? That bird that sticks his head in the hole, ostrich or whatever. And I thought, oh, how funny is this? There's 4 individuals. They're all looking in this hole, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Why are you just looking in that hole? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're on a burial site and that's a mound right there, there was 38 other mounds around that mound. And because you didn't see them, that whole area here is considered a burial mound site. But a lot of archaeologists will only look at that one that's intact, and they won't see the other, and we have to remind them, it's not just about that one. You have to look at this whole area. And this whole area, because the road went through, the bones and stuff are within that roadbed. And that's what we need to look for. Another time we were out with archaeologists again, and we were walking in the woods doing a phase 1 walkover. And I said, oh, look, this, we found some sites and some things, shards. And one of the archaeologists in the conversation with him, the words that he said to me was, you guys couldn't have walked all over this, couldn't have been all over this continent. And I said, oh yeah, we were, but that kind of stuff that they say is their belief that we weren't, in my teachings as I was growing up, the elders told me that this is our 4th journey across this continent, that we've been over this continent. This is the 4th journey we're on as Anishinaabe people. The last one I'll leave you with is, see if I can remember it here. Now I'm getting caught up here. Well, I guess I'm not supposed to tell you it. But there's just, we were on a mound site at a dam site, and we were having consultation with the Army Corps. And one of probably the second time working with the Army Corps that they actually sided with our tribe and the consultants to remove a road that went over a mound site. Burials were clearly underneath the road. And they told the park that they weren't going to lease that road out to them anymore. And they got till 2025 to create a new road in there so that we could remove that road and put it back to a burial site. And we were in consultation with the city that the park was in. And a lady for the city said, well, is it okay if we use a GPR unit and we go down and we don't see no graves underneath there and we build a bike trail? And so I said to her, well, let me go to where your ancestors are buried. I'll go between their graves and there's nobody there. Is it okay if I put a bike trail there? Silence. Well, no. I said, well, that's what you're asking us. These are all burial sites, and because you don't see them because they've been disturbed, doesn't mean that our people aren't there still. Our blood and our DNA is within the ground. It's in the trees. It's in the grass. It's all over there. And I want to just leave you with one other last thing that I was going to talk to these gentlemen about later on, is that, I think this gentleman over here, Wakiwenzi, said blood memory. Blood memory is very important for us as Anishinaabe people, a memory of a long time ago. And to be able to do that, not everybody can do that. Not everybody has that gift. The Creator gives that to us if you're lucky and you do the things that you need to do. But in that memory, there's a time of old. And we have to understand, doing the work that we do, one, not to get angry, not to get upset. And if you do, back off. Remember your cultural traditions, your values. And the other thing is that, we didn't have death as Indian people. America brought death to us. We didn't have death. Again, America brought death with it. And it introduced us to death. In our sites that we call burial grounds and things like that now, they're places I consider to be like a computer, a place where if you have blood memory, your people can come back to you and teach you. And I believe that's what they're doing today. That's how powerful we are as individuals, as Anishinaabe, as Native people. Is that our people a long time ago didn't expect this to happen, but they're coming back to teach us. They're coming back to show us love again. And they're showing us how to act as Anishinaabe people, as Indian people, to do the right thing again. And again, we didn't have death. We had the turnover. We went to another life. We exited this body. Some people call it a space suit or earth suit. And the spirit moved on. And those are the things that we have to think about as human beings. We're living a human existence, but we're a spiritual being. And those are things that I often think about when I'm dealing with agencies and ignorance, because there's a lot of ignorance out there. And the things that they say can make your blood boil. But if you take it and you turn it into you turn it into laughter, you have a good thought about it, then you have more solutions as to how to deal with it. And you just don't create anger in yourself and carry that. So take care of yourselves when you're doing this kind of work. You have to have that time for yourself. You have to make sure that you're good, because it can catch up to you. And I think I'll leave you with the fact that, these spirits that are out there, they follow you wherever you go. Once you form a relationship with them, wherever you go, they can follow you. They'll come home with you. They'll be there all the time. And they're not things to be scared of. They're things to acknowledge. And for whatever reason it is that they're there, they're on a journey too. And we just try to help them out the best that we can. Miigwech.
Bonjour. Sydney Martin. Ogimakwa Indishnikats. Maingandodem. Everybody thinks I don't have a clan. And my clan is Wolf Clan. And I'm very proud to be Wolf Clan. I know that from the time I used to go to Charlton Park and Hastings, and that's where Eli Thomas and Whitney Alberts from Mankato, the Oscoda area, gave me my Indian name, which is Ogimakwa. And so ever since that time, I tried to introduce myself as Ogimakwa, but everybody thinks that means like chief woman. And they told me that it means bossy woman. So I guess it could be either one, because I fit that either way. I can do bossy or be stoic Indian chief that everybody's scared of me. And little kids run from me if they see me, and their mothers will tell them, don't make her mad, stay away from her. She's mean. So I love living up to my mean name when little brats are running around me at powwows, or if they were here, I could scare them out of the room for us. And I've come to find out that humor in my repatriation work has gotten all of us through so many sad, hard times all across America. We've repatriated. And one time we were in Chicago, and my deadliest enemies on the from the University of Michigan at that time, we used to fight like cats and dogs constantly at meetings, repatriation meetings. And at that time, that was when NAGPRA was first being formed. And one of the mean ladies from the University of Michigan, her name was Carla Sinopoli. We used to fight and argue right in meetings constantly. And I would just flat out not put up with it and tell them, no, you're wrong. Just follow the law. Obey the federal law. That's all you need to do. Give our ancestors back. And I was constantly getting into arguments with her at every meeting that we would get at. And finally, at one meeting, we were in Chicago. I don't remember for which patriation that was from, but Carla Sinopoli walked by. And all of a sudden, I looked at her and I said, don't worry, I have a new enemy now. It's not you anymore. It's now Patricia Capone. And she was another bad one from University of Michigan. And I always should ask David Mitchner, who was here, if Trish and Carla are still around the U of M yet.
Trish is at Harvard.
Oh, Trish is at Harvard. I should go there and pick a fight with her. And because I love to pick fights with those adversaries at NAGPRA meetings and repatriation meetings. I'm not scared of anybody. And usually I'm just a pretty mellow person and I don't get too angry too many times. But when I would get to NAGPRA meetings, as a lot of the old NAGPRA people can attest to, I was hell on wheels. I could yell at anybody and tell them off, and because I was sticking them for the ancestors. And that's all I knew. We had to get our ancestors back, and I didn't care who I offended or who I hurt or how much I might have swore at them or whatever. I just did what I did, and I'm not sorry. Meet you.
My mother. Oh, my goodness, but I have to just echo and amplify my brother Terry and my mom and Deanna. That humor is most important. It's one of our most beautiful values that we carry, you know, as First Peoples of this part of the world, and it has helped us get through some of the darkest times. And we always have to try to find levity in this work. I remember one of the first cross-country repatriation trips that we took, and this was to Harvard. And William Johnson, who is now the chairman of NAGPRA, the late Charmaine Shawanaba, who was serving on Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Council at the time, and feisty Saginaw Chippewa elder named Ruby Mishabus. The four of us traveled to Boston for 15 hours. I drove, and they were all patting me on the back. You're doing really good. You're doing good. Are you okay? Do you need anything? And so they were having a good time, listening to the oldies, telling stories, sharing their humor, Indian humor, being irreverent. And as we were traveling to retrieve these ancestors, we had made a plan prior to leaving to come back with them. And we wanted to be our most honorable, the four of us. And if you've been in a van with us for 15 hours, we're not honorable. But we planned the drive back to be with utmost reverence, because we were carrying these beautiful Gitee and Anishinaabe ancient ancestors back with us. So Willie said, I know what we can do. He goes, let's make copies of these Ojibwe wax cylinder recordings, the Densmore wax cylinders, and we'll put them in the van, and our ancestors will recognize them, I hope, and we'll listen to them all the way home. So as we were preparing to leave Boston to come back home, Willie digs out these CDs, and he sticks the first one in. How many of you have listened to wax cylinder recordings? Okay. So by the time we probably made it an hour out of Boston, the 70s music came back on because of the, and you could barely hear the singing. So with our best intentions, we tried to provide the reverential music for them, and we played that music for about an hour and a half, but it became too, it made us too anxious. So we had to revert back to visiting and finding our humor and listening to classic rock, and together we realized at that point that the ancestors want to hear us. They want to hear our laughter and enjoy our voices and hear our jokes, as dirty as our jokes may be. And that's what we learned on that trip. And we took that forward with every trip that we made across the country. And Ruby always had a saying, she always would say, what happens in the van stays in the van. And, and Ruby was, she would always be reading, she'd bring about 2 or 3 books of serial killers. So she was an avid reader and a truth seeker about the most notorious serial killers in the country. So she would tell us about them as we're traveling. I was driving again to Nebraska and it was winter and I had a scarf around my neck. And she goes, Shannon, you shouldn't wear scarves. And I said, Ruby, it's cold. Why not? I have so many scarves. Are you asking somebody to kill you? She goes, people can come up behind you and strangle you with your scarf. So, from her, we also learned survival skills. But finding levity in those moments during this work gave us the balance we needed. So much so, Ruby would goad and tease some of those that we were consulting with. And Amadeus Scott was one of her targets when we would meet with the University of Michigan. I think the first meeting, Ruby asked Amadeus, who was just stumbling over herself, to make sure we were comfortable at our first meeting, making sure there was coffee and tea. And they put out a big spread of fresh fruit and Danish. And Amadeus was so happy, that when we arrived, everything was ready. Ruby walks into the little conference room, looks around and goes, I don't see any dark chocolate Snickers here. So from that moment, as an institutional representative, Amadeus put that in her memory bank. The next time and every time thereafter that we would travel and consult with the University of Michigan, which was numerous times, she would have Snickers there and Coca-Cola for Ruby, making sure she had what she needed. So it is, those times that you find humanity, when you can find the common ground of respect, mutual respect and humanity, gentle teasing and laughter, that sets the tone for the relationships to be enduring and to be fruitful, and for you to achieve what seems monumental, and that is to work together to bring home the ancestors and their funerary belongings. And it's finding that sliver of common humanity. And I think that many of us who do this work, we try to do that. And I know there are times when you may think you're opening a door into your culture or spirituality, that you may have opened it too far. But sometimes you have to trust in yourself, and you have to trust in what the ancestors, because they're there helping you. They're going to help guide you. And there have been some songs that I have sung, and some songs my sisters and brothers have sung in the presence of the ancestors, that you think maybe we shouldn't have allowed others who are not of our culture to hear. But we have allowed that in certain instances. And I think we have seen that change and re-scramble those on the other side of the table. We have those stories, we see them. Carla Sinopoli is one of them. We consider her a great friend now. So friendly, I send her my dad's beadwork photos and she says, I'll take that one, and we ship it out to her. But she's a supportive person who changed over the course of 20 years when we first started consulting with the University of Michigan. And there were others at that institution who we have seen change. And it's because of finding moments of levity, teasing, and bringing forth ourselves in ways that makes us seem not so angry about the situation. It's like there are times when we are angry and frustrated, but it's moving into that place where you can find that isthmus of commonality and being a part of this human experience. So meet you.
Oh.
Oh.
Bishu, Ani, Melissa Wiatrolik, Nadishnikas, Megazin Adodam, Odawa Ojibwe Mishnah Bandao, Optawing the Ojibwe, Abading, Diju Medeo. I want to say Chimigwech for having me. My name is Melissa Wiatrolik. I'm from Eagle Clan, Odawa Ojibwe, from Middle Village in Harbor Springs, Michigan, first degree Medeo. I have been doing my position as the Chippo, NAGPRA, and NAGPRA treasurer for about 5 years. I have been working for my tribe, the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians, for about 2 decades now. But this is the most unselfish work that I've ever done in my life, and I'm honored and grateful to be part of this. But I want to say miigwech to my elders and my teachers in Association of American Indian Affairs and my fellow panelists, my ancestors, and most importantly, Nindaway Manaduk for guiding us through this work that we do with our ancestors. And also the ones that did this work before us, like my grandma Sid and my sister Shannon. They had to endure all those things that they had to endure to make it better for my generation to come at the table with these individuals and not have to hear so many silly things. But a couple of things that I want to share with what I get that I think is pretty silly is the question is, how do you know those remains belong to you? And I always have to ask these academics, well, have you read the report or the site files? Because usually they tell you, the archaeologists, sometimes if you're lucky, the location where they went and, disturbed our ancestors. And they will tell you that. So, and usually it's right in their backyard of a reservation area where we're still at existent. That's one, pretty silly thing I always thought was a silly question to ask. And another one is recently, because we've been doing a lot of work up in the Straits area, Mackinac City, is the before contact repatriations, the old, like my sister Shannon said, the old ones that we repatriate. How do you know they are from the same people as the natives now? I kind of chuckle because I think of like our tradition or our culture, because I always look at everything through tradition and culture first. Everybody has a creation story, right? And then it talks about those first people. And it talks about, that's example of like the traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous knowledge or whatever definition they call it, myths that we have, that it's important, like the science, to be able to respect, our ways that we are believed and that we were raised, and birthed into knowing these ways, tradition and culture ways. And I was thinking about these strategies that that could, be improved and worked on. And it's all, and first thing that I come up with is with humility, is having the ability to say you don't know and ask questions and be humble enough to do that. And to have the respect. And I always tell people, look at it through a different lens. Your lens is not always the right lens. You have to look at it all different angles. Because in our lives, we are all taught, we were told and taught that we respect all living things, no matter what. And sometimes it's just, it's communication, breaking down that communication barriers and, talking and sometimes just asking who that person is to speak with, an authority for that tribe. And just like my grandma Sid said, follow the law. It spells it out. Your ancestors are the one that developed that law. And later on came to my, relatives and asked, for advice on that and how to better that. That's why I'm so grateful and honored to be here and on the panel with these individuals that endured all that, to be able to have my generation to sit here and not have to go through all of that. Because like Grandma Sid says, stop frogging around. But, you know, and to understand how passionate we are in this, in what we do, you know, it's, and how important we take our roles as practitioners, TIPOs, NAGPRA, MAGPRAs, representatives of our tribes that work with those ancestors and those spirits. And because we are the voices, you know, we're the voices that they don't have, you know, we have to be those voices, and the spirit talks to us. My, you know, brother Terry said, and most importantly, like my sister Shannon Martin says, you know, just make sure to be a good ancestor every day. I live by that every day. And, you know, those are the best practices and strategies to be able to, you know, work together, live those 7 grandfather teachings so we can live in harmony. So, Misa way, Chimigwech for having me, listening, and let me have this time and space. Miigwech, anyway.
One thing my little sister Melissa brought up was, has been a part of this experience at many universities, institutions, where they question the ancestry that you are fighting to bring home. And there seems to be the 1,000-year-old time stop. And my mom has said it numerous times that how can you say, and what studies do you have that state that we are not descendants of these Gitane Anishinaabe, these ancient ones? They just didn't disappear, die. And then there was a time stop. And then our people sprung up like mushrooms with no direct connection to them. So, you know, these scholarly journals and writings and theories that, you know, our ancestors, whether they're classified as mound builders or Hopewellian, that were a part of this Mississippian range, that those ancient ones were not related to us. That's probably one of the silliest things that we have to always confront, because people's careers are based on studying, you know, these sites and the lithics, and like to say that no present day tribal people are related to anyone over 1,000 years old. So I think that's probably one of the silliest things that we've encountered. So miigwech to my little sister Melissa for bringing that point up.
The other one is that we came over here on a land bridge. I always get into it with them over that one. Them being the academia. Those ones that know it all. The ones that don't know a damn thing about any of us, except what they want to have in their own prejudiced mind.
And speaking of the mounds, we took a site visit, many of us from the Michigan tribes, at a repatriation event. And our host took us to the Angel Mound site. And reluctantly spoke about the excavation of one of the larger mounds. I think that excavation took place around 2016. Sonia was at 2014, 2016. They were still excavating Angel Mounds. And one of the archaeologists reluctantly talked about that. And the mound had been opened up and dissected and was left that way. And a big thunderstorm came through torrential rain and washed away the integrity of that mound. And spoke to, was sharing this reluctantly with us, but then went on to say, but I think we've rebuilt it back to its original dimensions. And that's what we see throughout, the country, is the excavation of our burial mounds and the mounds that contain, our history and cultural materials, cultural heritage. They strip them apart and then feel proud that they could rebuild them. It's not rebuilding them. So I think that's another part of, this narrative, is the silliness in that they, these folks think they can rebuild a sacred ancestral mound to its original integrity. After taking everything, after emptying it, they think that's a wonderful thing that they did for us.
I think I'd just like to leave with, I think one of the most memorablest times I've had doing this work is coming out to Michigan and being with you guys in ceremony. And to experience the love, the kindness, the ceremony, the goodness in the things that people here do. And the open arms that they have for, other tribes coming out to support them here in repatriation. These are our homelands of long ago, and we're not interested in bringing them to Minnesota. We want them to keep in situ as close as they can to the homes where they were buried at. And so we support Michigan and the tribes here from Minnesota to do that. And anything that we can do, these are the most memorable times I've had working in this field. It was coming out to Michigan and being with these people. So I just like to say that and miigwech to you.
How about any of you? Do you have any silly stories? I think all of our speakers have taken their turn.
Hi there, I'm Zathali. I do have a silly story. I'm an undergraduate student at Arizona State University. I run into a couple of my fellow students that I've heard throughout this conference, I've been hearing people use the example of, like trying to relate with their loved ones or their grandparents. And I remember in specific, this one person, she was going on and saying how she doesn't care how her loved ones get buried. She just would want someone to do that research. How can we explain to them further that just because they don't care doesn't mean that other people don't care what happened to their loved ones? Thank you.
It's like one person cannot speak for an entire family, let alone an entire band or tribe or nation, just because of the place where they're at, that they believe that once you're in the ground. And I've encountered, some of our own people who feel that way as well. It's like, your journey is done. I'm in the ground. I don't care if anyone digs me up and studies me. So but you can't impose that, your own personal belief in that way, on an entire family, band, tribe, nation.
I agree 100%. If a person chooses that for their self, there are certain documents that they need to fill out, stating that they are open to their self being scientifically studied, but you cannot impose that on your loved ones or family members without their consent. It's their bodies.
I remember when my mother passed away and she wanted to be cremated because she had this fear of bugs. So she told, I'm the oldest one of the family, Muchikos, and she told me that's what she wanted. Well, that kind of went over the tribe, our tribe, pretty, because we're all buried traditionally over there. And they said, well, if some of the elders said, well, if you're going to do that, we're not going to come, And I thought, well, that's pretty shitty, and come just because how she wants to be buried, And so I went and passed tobacco out to the elders, went to their homes and gave them tobacco and, said, this is my mom's wishes. And, why is that you're, doing this? And every one of them came back and said, hey, yeah, you'd have to live with it all your life. I understand what you're doing, and I couldn't go against my mom's wishes. So, we spend a lot of time in this world on these issues. We spend a lot of time in this world on historical trauma. And I wish that in my lifetime, we'd get to a place as Indian people where we acknowledge the strengths that we have. That's our forefront. That's our strength. Our connection to this earth is given to us by the Creator to help us, to keep us here through all the things that we've faced. And a lot of times in these institutional world that we live in now, we're focused on, whether it's college or education or whatever, we're focused on the negative things about Indian people, and I think that at some point in time, we have to come to an understanding that, we're a very proud race and we're a very strong people to endure and to be where we're at and to go through all the things that we've gone through and still doing what we're doing today. And those are the things that I think other people, when historical trauma first came out, it was really meant for the white people to understand what we've been through. And then they didn't want to listen to it, so now we listen to it. So, and I think that's a big, in America, people need to understand. It's not taking accountability for things in the past, but it's just understanding what the hell happened and why the things are happening today. Because no matter what you believe, I often tell people, I can't change you, but I can tell you something and you can change yourself. And everything that white America has been taught, that's to look at Indian people in a certain way. You've all been indoctrinated to that from little kids. And you have to look in yourself first. You have to look in yourself first to make those changes, to understand us. And when you make those changes, you'll begin to know. Because you're no different than us. Nobody in this world is different from each other. We're all the same spiritual beings. So that's enough for me.
We have. My timing on the Zoom comments is not good today. I'm sorry. I wanted to recognize that we do have some non-native people in the Zoom room, and they're saying, I'm listening when you had mentioned about historic and intergenerational trauma. And I also just wanted to put it out there for a sense of humor. I just wanted to do a shout out for the song, Give a Wolf a Banana. If you ever need a song that will make you giggle, that's the song for you. And if you see Uncle Michael wandering around with bananas, that's why. In the meantime, I have Randy, and I don't know if this is rhetorical or not, so I'll let you guys decide. He says, we've been studied for years by all types of academic researchers and government agencies. How do we get these folks to stop using us as study materials?
Well, that's a tough one because that's their systems and their ways of doing things, we heard that today in that presentation of DNA and, and all the time that I'm thinking about these things, when are they going to stop? When are they going to stop? There's a good book out there by Vine DeLorean Jr. called Red Earth, White Lies. If you ever get a chance to read that, it kind of gets a perspective as to what this country has built itself on, the lies. And the lies that are told continually in the academia field. And that field itself is built on, I'm going to say a word that probably isn't right, but bullshit. And it doesn't explain us at all. They have no clue. And like I said earlier, it's about money. It's about keeping power. It's about them always feeling like, they're above us. And it's not like that, You can't get a loving more person than the Indian. You can't find anybody that's more loving than us. The things that we've been through, our family's been through with society in itself. And we're still here to help. We're still here to teach. We're still here to help, direct, and to lead you by the hand, to help you to understand that B word that you've all been taught in this country. So how do we get them to do that? Well, one, we don't support them in doing it. I tell people today, we're being assimilated faster than we've ever been assimilated in this world. We bought into it. Our government agencies, our people that are in places of power have bought into this world. This gentleman over here talks about blood memory and what it is to be an Anishinaabe. It's tough to be an Anishinaabe. It's tough to be an Indian because the world around us swallows us up. Today we're eating death. Any of you old people that remember when we used to go to the garden and pick our food and they go, there was such flavor. The earth, there was life in it. You were eating that life from Mother Earth. Today, our food is in a grocery store that's 30 days old. We don't have that anymore. And we have to pay attention to what we're doing to ourselves and what this country is leading us into, what the systems world itself, through education, through that, is all doing to us as Indian people. Yeah, we got to survive, but how much of that do we have to put up with, There was an elder gentleman who was given a teaching, and he drew a line on a chalkboard, and he said, this side's the Indian, this side's the white man, the systems world. I keep saying white man when you guys ain't white, you're just pigmentally challenged. So he said, here's the Indian side and here's that other side, right? The world we live in today. And he said, even the Indian now is living on that side. He said, but the beautiful thing that's happening in the world today, because our elders are finding that heart and that to help us, and the world is coming back alive to help us, is that we're taking that step over on the other side. And he said, the more and more that you step on that other side, the more and more you're going to realize who you are. And the more and more you're going to want to stay on that side. And he said, eventually, as you grow older, you're going to just be on that side and realize this side has nothing for you. There's nothing there. And I think about those things, those elders taught me like that, because it's true. As I'm 62 years old, so I'm still young, but at 62, I've been through a lot in this world and I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, but I can change that by following this way that the Creator gave to us as Indian people, and not be a follower, but be an Anishinaabe. And start to pass those things, There's a time to talk and there's not a time to talk. There's a time to teach and a time not to teach. And sometimes that time to keep your mouth shut's pretty difficult, you know, but you got to learn to do it because you got to listen. And some people's, when you listen to them, those people that want to just continue to do surveys on us and all those other things, you just got to not listen to them. They're not beneficial for any of us. And we have to start looking at our homes. You know, we're an Anishinaabe nation. Because the Sac and this tribe is way out here doesn't mean we're not from one nation, but they separated us. And we have to begin to understand, you know, we're all related. I often tell archaeologists, you know, they got us as nomads traveling with backpacks and, you know, little dogs with poles and stuff, you know, from one area to another. And we had metropolises, we had major cities the size of Chicago. You know, and we weren't like that till later on in our life. But you can imagine 500 canoes, you know, we weren't separated by Chippewa, Dakota. We were brown-skinned people living in this continent. And you can imagine 500 canoes coming up those rivers to come to visit their brown-skinned relatives from the north. And they were bringing gifts, and they were bringing love and getting ready for ceremony. And maybe out of that 500, 450 would go back. Some would stay with that tribe, you know, intermarry. They would be buried with that tribe. You know, we spent so much time, whose burial ground is this, whose is that? But yet we are all together in this world at one time. And this systems world that we live in focuses on a time of, they want us to believe that we fought each other all the time, and we didn't. That was not what the Creator gave to us. He gave us love. The truth of this earth. That's what He gave us to understand as Indian people. And for a long time now, because of the systems world and because of those people that are doing the things that you talk about, it's taken us away from that. So be aware, you know, pay attention to your surroundings, and it's up to us to take it back. You know, that's us, our own selves. We can take it back because we never left it. It's in there. It's just what we're settling for out here. Good.
Oh.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's up to the tribes to take back that control. So what we do is we contact all of the universities and museums that we're aware of that have remains that we believe are connected to our Chickasaw people. And we ask that per US Code 25S 3003, Section B, that no scientific studies of remains or other means of acquiring scientific preservation of information happen without consultation with the tribes. And if you put that, you know, in a formal letter to them, then they're required to consult on that.
Can I address the mic? Yeah. Let's say something. What's your name? The guy who just got done speaking. I can't see you because of my eyes. I'm legally blind.
Bond, James Bond.
James Bond, 007.
Yeah.
Then my mother would like you. She loved James Bond.
My white name's Terry Kemper, Bushkiniashi Indigenous.
I agree with everything you say. Sid, I love you. You got that humor that makes me laugh, you know, and Shannon does too, but her humor is kind of a dry humor, you know?
Yeah,
Yours, it must be because we're both Wolf Clan.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Lynx, she's Lynx.
Yeah,
I'm a wolf.
you're a wolf. We're brother and
Oh,
sister.
Eat that banana, whoever said. I'll have that banana.
But when you're talking about humor and stuff like that, Shannon, you know, and Sid, your mother, I just love her because she makes me laugh all the time. And, you know, and amongst our people, we need that. You know, we need straight talk. with what Terry said there too. You know, I'm going to talk about a little humor here. You know, when we get these remains, sometimes we get, how do I say, we get too serious. Uh-oh. What's going on? Huh? A banana. Anyway, we get too serious at times, you know, even when I do ceremonies and stuff like that, I try to bring humor in there. You know, because sometimes we walk around with like, how do I say it, like a corn cob up our butt. You know what I'm saying? Because we get too serious, we're like this, our heads in the air, you know what I'm saying? And that's what we get sometimes, and we forget that in our life, you know, we have that seriousness, but we also have that humor. One time we got some remains, and Frank Bush was here, and we took these remains to my house and we cleared off my dining room table, and we put a red blanket down there. And there's a bunch of remains there, and we're going to sort them out, you know. Clarence White was there, Dan Rapp, Tom Topash, you know, I think John Warren was there, you know. And I said, just hold it, guys, hold it. So I ran upstairs real quick, and I brought this thing down. I said, we'll find out now where these bones, how they're attached. I brought the operation game out. And I put it down on the table, and Frank Bush just started laughing. And sometimes we can get too serious, and somebody I grew up said, Clarence, you shouldn't be doing that, man. I said, hey, you gonna tell me that these spirits that are here right now, they didn't have any humor? That they're probably laughing at this time, you know, up there, you know, oh my God, you know, and they might not know what an operation game is, but just by looking at it, you know. And so we need that humor in our ceremonies, but also I know this is a very serious thing. Terry, you're talking about your mother wanted to be cremated. And I understand that wholly, because my eldest son wants to be cremated too. And we talk about this. I told him, I said, you know, that is not the way our people do those things. We don't cremate. He said, well, you know, Dad, he says, the way the burial system is now today, they dig a big hole and they put you in a coffin inside a coffin. He says, so when you get put in there, he says, you never go back to Mother Earth. He says, your remains don't, they just stay in that coffin. And I thought about that for a long time. I said, you know, Paul, you might be right. He says, Dad, when I pass away, he says, I want to go back to Mother Earth from whence I came. He said, I want my ashes spread in certain places. And so I can understand where your mother's coming from. And sometimes, you know, we need to think about that issue amongst our people. You know, it's not like it was a long time ago. Now, if you go up into Canada, they don't have the cement walls inside a coffin. It's just wood. And it's a wooden coffin. So eventually, over time, they go back to Mother Earth in that way. Okay? So, but as an Anishinaabe people, I don't know, you know, we need to think about the situation, you know, because I know when I pass away, I want to go back to Mother Earth. And I talked to some funeral directors, I said, is it possible when I pass away, could there be a hole at the bottom of that doggone vault? He goes, why? I said, so I can crawl through it. I want to get back to Mother Earth. I want my remains to go back to Mother Earth. He said, you can't do this. That's against state law. You can't do that. And so I think about that. And the more and more I think about it, being a traditionalist like I am, but I think about that, I says, well, how am I going to get back to Mother Earth if I'm in this doggone cemented vault coffin and I'm in another coffin inside that cemented vault? I'll never get there. You know? And I think about that quite often. I think, and my son, that's what he wants. He wants to be cremated. And, you know, and I'm not going to say, oh, you can't do it. But that's his wish, just like your mother's wish. And we got to honor those wishes, even though we have traditions and how we think about things. But when I think about it, like I said, it's not like it was a long time ago. When we put our people into the ground, we put them into the ground, maybe wrapped in birch bark or elm bark. And eventually they would go back to Mother Earth. Nowadays, it's kind of difficult to do that. And so I think about that quite a bit. And I think you, as Native people, ought to think about that too. You know, do you want to go back to Mother Earth, or do you want to be captured in a cement vault, in a metal coffin, inside a cement vault, just there? I think about that. You know, and I just, it's something that I think we all need to think about. One story here, one time, and before Dan Rapp passed away, Dan Rapp, he used to be head of our traditional repatriation committee down here with Pokagans. And being that I am not part of their tribe, but I've been with them for a long time, and I used to belong to this committee. And I was down in Sullivan County. I think it was 1999 or something like that, maybe in 2000. Anyway, we had a powwow down there because I got involved with these two women who were trying to get the Indiana commission going down there. And so we got it passed. And so we had a powwow. I think it was in 2002 or so. Well, anyway, we had this powwow, and George Martin was going to be the head veteran. And I was going to be the MC. But for some reason, I couldn't do it. So I called John Bailey in, and he did it because John Bailey is a good MC. So anyway, when we were down there, there was a senator. His name was Senator Waterman. He was a state senator. And I went to some of the schools, you know, not in my regalia, but just to give a talk. And later on, you know, during that powwow in the evening, you know, he says, Clarence, I want to take you someplace. He said, I want to take you to some mounds we got in the woods. He says, I want you, what do you think? He says, how can we protect these things? And so he took me way back in this wooded area back there. As soon as I got to the mound, man, it was dug out already. And I couldn't believe it. He said, oh my God. He says, I can't believe people would do that. I said, well, who else knew about this? He goes, well, a lot of people did. Well, apparently they got in and dug things out of there. Well, anyway, and in the meantime, he said, I want to take you someplace else. He says, we have this, this was in Sullivan County. It was in Evansville, Indiana. He says, we have a Sullivan County Museum I want to take you to. He says, I got something to show you. And so I went in there, and the guy who was managing that Sullivan County, he said, Clarence, I want to take you upstairs. So he took me upstairs, and laying in his glass case was remains of a Native woman. Apparently they found her someplace, and they just picked her out of there with the same dirt, and they put her in his glass so everybody can come in and take a look. And it brought me down to tears. I told him, I said, how can this be? How can you have this woman in here? He goes, well, Clarence, he said, that's why we wanted you to be here. He says, because we want to talk to you about how can we give it to you to be buried someplace in a sacred way. He says, because we know that this is wrong. I said, okay, fine. So I got a hold of Dan Rapp, got a hold of the Repatriation Traditions Committee. We talked about that for a while. And the guy who was the curator of this museum, he goes, well, you know, Clarence, says, I have one request. He said, I'd like to be there when you put the remains back into Mother Earth. I want to see what you're doing. That's no problem. I talked out with the Traditions Committee, and they said, that's fine. And so he came to my house, and he stayed at my house. He brought the remains down, and We took care of them. And Dan Rapp is that type of person, you know, when we do these kind of things, he always likes to have 4 pipe carriers, one representing each direction. And I think this was his last one he did, because later on that fall, he passed away. He was 70 years old. He was a good man. And so we took care of those remains. But the thing that really bugged me most of all, and how people can be, we took them from Indiana, and lo and behold, the Miami people got upset with us because we took them. Well, we didn't take them, you know, he gave them to us from the museum, no problem. And they were upset. Well, no, you know, we should have done that, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I said, hey, this is what he wanted to do. And we did what he asked us to do, as long as he was there. And so we took care of those remains and we put them in the Niles cemetery, where we was putting all the remains. Where else would you want to put them? You put them in a white man's cemetery, and they won't mess with them. We learned that. Well, interesting, we did that. And come to find out, this curator of this museum, he was talking to us. He said, I used to be a science teacher. He says, you guys want to know something? No, he says, David Letterman used to be one of my students. We said, you kidding me? He goes, oh, no. She said, he's back in those days, he was a shithead. He was always cracking jokes in my class and stuff like that. She said, now look at him. He's a doggone multi-millionaire on TV. And I thought to myself, oh my God. But I guess what upset us was that because this other tribe, Miami tribe down in Indiana, got upset with us because we took his mane away, but they weren't recognized. They're not even state recognized. And I believe we did tell them, because I think one of their spiritual people was there with a pipe, so they knew about it, but some of them got really, really upset that we did that. But that's what I wanted to share with you. I enjoy the panel. I love to hear the humor from our people, because it's there. It's there. It's always been there. We have to stop being so serious with each other. We get to be who we are, because we do have that humor and we do have that seriousness in us. And that humor is what makes us that very special type of people. Jim McGuitch.
So I know we're probably out of time here, but I'd like to sing you a song. This is an old traveling song from, I believe it's from This Res.
Oh.
1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians. No, wait a minute. That's sorry. No. All right, here we go. I sing a song, and some of you might know a man named Carl Swan.
You'll never
Created
find
this song. Way I am. Bezindawe gimete go dagone be dago ake aya mana jetun giga benda magun be ma desewen dago kiga bende magun chene sag dega maya onje mane do ozagi wen ewe gago santa man Bezindawe gimete go dagone be dago ake aya mana jetun giga binda magan
choked up when I hear our language and songs. That felt good, Rich, Uncle Terry. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that this panel took us on a wide variety of emotions. At one point, they were wilding out up here. But I also want to say that this panel has been incredible. I have been fortunate enough to learn from so many of you on this panel and work directly with you and spend time with you in ceremony and bring the ancestors home together. And it's just an honor to hear you speak about those things as Melissa said so eloquently, and paving the way for us younger ones in Michigan. So thank you. And please, one more time, can we give it up for this panel? I have a couple of announcements, if you'll bear with me. I just want to remind everybody that you do have your daily survey on the table. As a reminder, we're not asking you to fill out a survey for each session. Rather, we just want to hear about how your day was. And so if you could take a moment to either fill that out hard copy with your pens and return it to the registration table, or use your electronic device to use the QR code. We really appreciate the feedback. It does help fuel us and get us ready and jazzed up for next year. So we appreciate you taking the time. If you're on Zoom and you're tuning in, there's one session that will start, I think, right now. It's the final session of the day, and it's labeled Daily Survey, October 12th, 2022. So you should be able to enter that room, and there's a link there for the survey. I want to remind everybody we do have an amazing night planned. The Pokagon Band of Pottawatomi is providing a drum and dance exhibition here in this space. I want to let everyone know that all conference attendees are invited. And if you brought a friend along or a spouse or somebody who's been upstairs in the hotel this entire time, please feel free to bring them down and enjoy tonight. We'll see a wonderful big drum coming. Iron Bear Singers is a community drum here in this Pokagon community. And so we'll be honored to have them here and some dancers from this community. I want to also let you know that there will be no food at this event, but there should be some snacks. So just a reminder, please take care of your dinner plans in between now and then. I also want to remind everybody that we have sunrise ceremony again tomorrow at 7 a.m. Again, use entry B from the outside hallway. It's this last conference room in the back, and everyone is welcome to attend that as well. Something that I realized as I was standing here that I didn't acknowledge and take care of, and something that I feel like I need to do at this moment, is just to acknowledge that we did have our color guard here yesterday, Pokagon Band of Pottawatomi color guard, who beautifully danced in these flags. And I just want to acknowledge this Miigwech, this Eagle staff that's joining us here. Please feel free to wave, say bonjour, say hello, acknowledge this beautiful spirit that's with us and this staff, because it's so meaningful and so beautiful that the community allowed us to have this here with us and to guide us in our discussions. I see your hand, and I'm going to wait until the end of my announcements. Okay. I also think there's somebody here that didn't get any acknowledgement for their hard work, and I'm so sorry to put you on the spot, but the rest of our staff and our board and our volunteers were acknowledged, but somebody else didn't get any acknowledgement. And if we could all just take a moment and give a round of applause to the association CEO and attorney, Shannon O'Loughlin, for all her hard work for this conference. And now Shelley, is there someone on Zoom that has a question or a comment?
We actually have one for you that they kind of started. Zoom for tonight is still happening, correct? Because that's on as a session and
Yes.
Confirm.
Yep.
Okay.
The Zoomers can, I don't know if I should call them Zoomers, sorry. You can tune into that event. It will be on the Zoom. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Did I forget anything? Okay, great. Well, thank you for a wonderful day too. This has been fantastic. And Doug, did you have a question?
I have a short story, if you give me the time, please.
Sure.
Okay, bonjour again, Dale Anderson, here on Pottawatomi. I was first introduced to the spirit world at the age of 6. I've been, I handled my first dead body at 18 in Vietnam. There is an upside to what we do. We've heard about the humor, the stories that we've been able to hear from our elders and in the bands and the jokes and everything. But what I have to say is we was in, I think it was Princeton, bringing home some remains. And it had been a long day. So I'm up in my room, I'm laying on my side, and I got a nudge like that on my back. And all I said was, I was really tired. So I just said, bonjour, Grandpa, how you doing? Because my grandpa always visits me, no matter where I'm at in the United States, Turtle Island, he'll come see me. I drift back off to sleep. And in my sleep, I feel this, I'm in a place that's warm. And there's an entity across from me. And I can tell it's a female entity. And I have my hands out like this. And her hands are underneath my hands, so they're like this. And I could feel the bones in her digits. And they went, I don't know how they used to shake hands back in the olden day, but she took my hands and went 1, 2, just like we do a handshake this way. She took my hands and went 1, 2. Then she pulled her hands back and I could feel the bones in her digits going across mine. And she was saying, thank you for bringing them home. That's the upside of what we do, is that they are grateful and they are glad to be home. Miigwech.
Miigwech for that story, Doug. Very powerful. We appreciate that. Okay, so thank you all for a wonderful day 2 of the 8th Annual Repatriation Conference. We look forward to spending our final and the 3rd day with you all tomorrow. Breakfast starts at 7:30. Miu.